Well, welcome. I think somebody's there. I'm not certain who it might be. Go ahead and comment in the comment area. Leave a comment in the comment area and let me know who's here. And although it's saying I'm unable to connect to chat. Why am I unable to connect to chat?
Did we enable it in the thing?
Let me see. There's something up there. We'll see if others can see that. Begin. Get my Bible ready here. I don't know that I'm connected to chat at all for some reason. That may not be good tonight.
That says we are here.
Yeah, I'm not seeing that. Do you see my comment?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And interesting.
So I may have.
So Susan may have to tell me what's going on in the chat room tonight because my chat is not updating for some reason.
Is there room for both of us to sit there?
No.
Okay.
Well, that's the answer to the question. Okay. Strange. Again, we're going to be in Psalm 78 tonight. We're not going to go through the whole psalm, but go through the first 8 verses and talk about them for a few minutes. This is strange.
Well, I better not take notes then. Picture very warbled. Yeah.
Pictures? Who said that?
Deb did. It looks grainy and stripy to me.
I don't want to end the stream because I think that will. I mean, I think that ends it. I don't think we can re-begin it.
No, we can't.
Restart it would probably be a better English word.
Better now, she says.
Okay.
As long as everyone can hear okay, I think we push on.
Oh. Well, I'm hoping that it just begins to connect to chat, but
Did you try refreshing the screen? Do you not want to even risk that?
I think I'll lose the stream if I do that. But I'm clicking other buttons to see what's available.
Okay.
And I don't see what's available. I mean, it's not giving me the option to refresh my chat. So, okay.
Well,
So we are going to, go ahead and chat. Go ahead and ask your questions as usual. Just realize there is going to be a delay. Susan says she can see my chat. So let me type this in the chat room really quick. That way, as others don't hear that message that I just said as they join, they'll be able to do it.
Click on pop out in the chat.
I can try that.
Try popping it out and back in. See if that works.
Well, it actually is showing that now. Let me see if I can.
You should be able to just shut that back and it'll go back. Or close it.
Nope, I'm going to have to leave it popped out. But at least I can see it when it's popped out. So
Okay.
Okay. So, come on. So we'll bring that over here. Okay. So again, we're being Psalm 78, and I'm going to go ahead and read those first 8 verses, and then we'll talk about that for just a little bit, and then question and answers as we do each week. So, okay, Psalm 78. It says a maskil of Asaph. Asaph actually wrote my well, it's not my favorite psalm, but he wrote the psalm that contains one of my life verses in Psalm 73. But here we have a psalm about making sure that we teach, making sure that we educate the next generation, and I'll explain why I've chosen that psalm. Last week we looked at Psalm 88 and the challenge that the man had within the context of that psalm. And so I wanted to give us something a little bit lighter this week from a psalm perspective as well. But in so doing, I wanted to encourage and challenge us, not just an uplifting psalm, but a psalm that would challenge us during this time. So the first 8 verses of Psalm 78. Give ear, O my people, to my teaching. Incline your ears to the words of my mouth. I will open my mouth in a parable. I will utter dark sayings from of old, things that we have heard and known, that our fathers have told us. We will not hide them from their children, but tell them to the coming generation the glorious deeds of the Lord and his might, and the wonders that he has done. He established a testimony in Jacob and appointed a law in Israel, which he commanded our fathers to teach their children, that the next generation might know them, the children yet unborn, and arise and tell them to their children, so that they should set their hope in God and not forget the works of God, but keep his commandments. And they should not be like their fathers, a stubborn and rebellious generation, a generation whose heart was not steadfast, whose spirit was not faithful to God. So, obviously, as parents, if we think about Deuteronomy chapter 6, for instance, in that passage where just after we have the great Shema, verse 4 and 5, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one," which Jesus quotes in giving the great commandment in Matthew 22 and Mark 12, for instance. He goes on to say, after "love the Lord your God," after that statement, that parents teach these things to your kids and write them on the doorpost, and as you're walking through, walking through, make sure you're teaching your kids. So I guess technically, I know it didn't say hi to Deb. Hi, Chad and Brandy. Say that, and my wife's here, so I'll say hi to her. But I already did that earlier today. But you teach your children, and so Psalm 78 is one of the great passages in the Bible about our responsibility to teach the next generation. Now, it is more than just teaching our children, it is teaching the next generation, but it includes teaching our children. As we think about it, what the parents would have a prime opportunity in that culture to teach their children as they are going out in the Adiana, as they are going out in the fields, as they are working around the house, moms with their daughters and dads with their sons. That's the way it was. They would have had a great opportunity to have taught and to share life's lessons. But there was also a communal perspective. There was the idea that elders within the community would teach those who are younger in the community. And what Psalm 78 gives us a little bit of a background on is what they are to teach. And that is to remember the works of God, to remember what God has done. And Asaph here talks about the fact that there is a generation who is this adulterous generation, as he says, that saw the works of God, that saw what God did to the Egyptians, for the Israelites, and yet they abandoned that understanding. And of course, we sit in our day and we knock those people for, I mean, how could you be going along day by day, week by week, and see that, that cloud and that pillar of fire, leading you uh, ahead and parting the Red Sea and bringing water from a rock and all those different miracles they saw, not to mention the Passover, not to mention the plagues and all of those things. How could you have all of those things and overlook God? Well, that's easy for us to blame. But 100 years from now, 200 years from now, 2,000 years from now, 4,000 years from now, will people say the same thing about us? What are those things? What are those moments in our lives and in our history where we have seen God at work? Hi, Kara. So, think back. One of the enduring scenes in my mind on 9/11, on the evening of 9/11, we were separated as a family. I was in St. Louis teaching that week, and like most of you, we went ahead with the class, but like most of you, I was glued to the television when I got back to my hotel that night, well, actually, I didn't stop by the hotel first. First, I went to get gas before it was like $22 a gallon. I don't think it went over $4 at that time, but anyway, and I remember one of the scenes that I saw was every congressman come out on the steps and sing, I believe, God Bless America, as well as other songs together. Didn't matter what party you were a part of. Didn't matter if you weren't a part of a party. Didn't matter if you were black, white, green, yellow, or pink. Everybody was united together. Well, that lasted not too long. And here we are again with an opportunity to draw together, but especially as those who follow Christ, as this particular psalm is getting towards. And so the idea that Asaph is writing about is that there will be generations that don't know. There will be generations that don't remember because they weren't there. So how will those generations know? If you think about it in a very literal sense for you and I, there's no way for us to know about the plagues. There's no way for us to know about the parting of the Red Sea. There's no way for us to know about the manna, coming from heaven. There's no way for us to know that except that somebody told somebody that told somebody that told somebody that it was written down and it was preserved. And those writings were then rewritten and rewritten and rewritten over time. And so, obviously Moses wrote the first 5 books, but something like this from Asaph, when was that written? We don't have the exact dates on that. So there is a generation now that does not know that this current disruption will end. But there are generations right now that know of previous disruptions that did end. I was on a recent interview that I did for my podcast. In fact, it's the episode that's airing this last week or this week, Monday, and then the rest of it 2-part interview because of the length of it. The second part goes live next Monday. And I think it was in this week's interview. I don't remember, or this part of the interview this week. The man, Dwayne McCrary, was talking about a 95-year-old woman who lived through tuberculosis and other things. And she recently wrote a letter to her granddaughter, maybe even great granddaughter. I don't remember the exact ages, and said, well, I went through this and I went through this and I went through this. And you know what? We'll get through this as well. And one of the things that Dwayne was telling me in that interview was the younger Christians right now are craving discussions with those who are older, senior adults especially, with that understanding, are we going to get through this? Is this going to be the rest of my life? Now, that's not their actual question. They don't know perhaps that's their actual question. But, if you're a young millennial, even if you're a middle-aged millennial, meaning like you're in your 30s, you probably don't have much recollection of 9/11, maybe a little bit, but you don't have any recollection of anything before that. If you're in Gen Z, so you're, maybe 22, 23 tops, but all the way down to age like 8 or 9, you have no recollection of any major challenge, not even the recession that we faced in 08, 09. So there is no understanding that we will get beyond this. And so what McCrary was telling me, Dwayne McCrary was telling me is um, the feedback that they're getting at Lifeway, he works for Lifeway, the feedback that they're getting from pastors and others at Lifeway is that younger people are craving the information, just information from those who are older. And so as I think about that, and I think about Psalm 78, that's a part of what the older generations could share with the younger generations is, what? God did get us through. God did part the waters. God did send manna. God did bring water from a rock. He did all those things. And then he did this, and then he did this, and then he did this. And the only people who really didn't get to benefit from it in the long term were those who forgot, were those who did not remember. The very generation that was supposed to pass on the information, the very generation that was supposed to teach their children and to teach their community and keep that understanding of who God was alive for future generations. Yeah, they told the story, but it didn't mean anything to them. So my encouragement and my challenge to us today in my part of this Bible study, then we'll go to Q&A in just a moment, is that you have seen God work. Maybe it's something personal in your life. Maybe it was a surgery. Maybe it was a something that wasn't even directly for you. Maybe it was how a brother or a sister or a parent. As I look through the few people who have commented here, just so far, I know of a few storms that have been going on in your life. And again, one of the things about storms is that you might look at somebody else's storm and say, wow, you've gone through so much more than me. But it doesn't take, as I've said before, it doesn't take but just a few drops of water when things are already saturated. So it could be a light rain that would create a flood. But we've all gone through things. And your children, your grandchildren, your friends' children, or whomever it might be, they need to know that this will end. And it may not end when we think it's going to end. It may not end how we want it to end. Just because it will end doesn't mean that there won't be people who are lost or who don't become ill. But this too shall pass, as it said. And so as we think about anxiety, I heard it said recently, anxiety it comes from trying to control what we can't control. We can't control this at all. Our government is trying to control this in various ways. Now states are trying to reopen and control things in various ways, and there's a place for that. That's not what I'm saying, and I'm not saying that anxiety is wrong. I mean, the Bible does say, "Do not be anxious about anything," but there are chemical imbalances as well that cause anxiety to happen. Okay, so I'm not criticizing that directly. But when we try to have control over things that we have no control, it will cause us to be overly anxious and just escalate from there. So that's what's happening to a lot of younger people, especially millennials, which probably the maximum age of that is upper 30s at this point, maybe 40. So they haven't seen this. Even experts like myself, we may not have seen what some others, but some of you watching this, you remember some major crises like that would predate me, at least predate my memory, like gas wars, like a president being killed. Some probably not on here, but others will remember World War II. Those are invaluable lessons that can be shared, or Korea, and many of you would remember Vietnam and stuff. So those are just some of the things. But even in my lifetime, the Challenger blowing up, I mean, those are maybe minor in the moment, but those are lessons that say to me and that we can say to others, just as Asaph was writing, encouraging a nation to share with their children and future generations. Those things say to me is, this was a challenge that brought people together. And if you've been watching my daily videos, there are solutions that we need right now, and you are a part of that solution. It may not be the solution of the great problem that we're dealing with right now, but we all have a place. We all have a purpose, and a part of that solution might be sharing hope to somebody else who might be the answer, or might hold the answer to the problem that is necessary to be dealt with at any given moment. So, anyway, that's my those first 8 verses just really set it up, and then the rest of the psalm is really kind of talking about some of the things that God did for the Israelites and reminding them from there. So again, that's what I wanted to share for tonight from a psalm perspective, and then open it up for questions, and then obviously we'll close with the time of prayer after a bit. So questions about the psalm or about anything else?
So you can see the chat.
And I am seeing the chat now. Well, somebody's typing. Hopefully, somebody's typing. Let me say this: we are as we go through these daily videos that we're posting on YouTube, and then Susan does the link over on Facebook. If there's anything that you would like for me to discuss, leave it in the comments, or you can put it in here tonight. But we will check those comments, and so if there's something that I have a list of things that I'm considering talking about, and this week I've got a theme. I have an idea of what we will do once we are meeting back together, or even if we're not by then. I think we will be, but how I'll tie in those discussions to the sermon. So I have some ideas, but if there's anything that you say, I'd like to talk more about this, and of course, this is a great venue for that. To answer those questions or whatever. But as I do those daily videos, if there's anything that you have questions about or whatever, Susan's trying to monitor those comments each day. And so please feel free to put a comment. Hey, Andy, would you talk about this or have a question about that? Especially if you have a question. One of the things I'm going to share, I can't remember whether it's tomorrow or on Friday, I messed up bad on Sunday.
Oh.
And I was very frustrated. You have to ask my wife, because I'm like many of you, I don't like to make mistakes, but when it comes to the Bible, and don't get me wrong, I don't know the Bible perfectly, but when I misstate something that is pretty elementary, I get mad at myself, because I don't want to mislead anybody. And on Sunday, and it was right at the beginning, right near the beginning of the sermon. And normally I might not even know it. I mean, maybe if I'm preaching in a live setting and somebody hears it, they might say, "Hey, Andy," or so somebody. There's one person on here right now who has actually corrected me in the midst of a sermon, and that's okay. If I say something wrong, I don't want to miscommunicate any information. But on Sunday, I made a comment about Adam and Eve in Genesis 3. And I'm like, how? And I think I know what I did in my mind, but Genesis 3, if you're doing a Bible reading plan, that's day 1, so many people have read that, right? And many more people know the story. But I made the comment that the serpent blamed Eve, and Eve blamed the woman. And Eve blamed the man, and the man had nobody else to blame. But when we were watching it with everybody else at the same time as everybody else, like, that's not what happened. That's not what happened at all. God asked the man, and the man blamed Eve, and Eve blamed the serpent. I had it backwards, and I just kicked myself. So, if I say something in a message, especially as we're doing these online for the next few weeks, I guess still, hey, Andy, what did you mean? So we posted a correction that day, even while probably many of you are watching it. Susan edited the content of the description to say correction, and it's right now, but really kicked myself. So, but this is why I'm going to bring this up. And again, I don't remember if it'll be in tomorrow's video or the next day's video, but as we think through this theme this week, we need to do something. We need to be involved. We need to be engaged. Perfectionism prevents progress. That's all you need to know. When we try to be perfect, we will not move forward. And, we're going to make mistakes. If we learn from those mistakes, that's what matters. So perfectionism prevents progress. One of my online mentors, we'll never meet. I'll never meet the man, but he mentors me a lot anyway. Doesn't know me, but that's okay too. I learn a lot from him, and that's one of his statements. And so I take that to heart. So hopefully somebody was typing a long statement or question down there, and I'm going.
Coming.
Yeah, I know there's none coming at the moment. Okay. So maybe somebody was typing more than 200 characters, and it'll come through in a minute. But I'm waiting for questions. While we continue to wait, we have begun our visits. We visited a few yesterday, and today Susan and I walked around town and visited a few people were not home, so we'll try to get back to them as soon as we can. Hello, Roger and Ann. And I guess technically I should say hi to Dan too, because Deb also used the plural pronoun of we. So yeah, we're making our visits. Might make a couple tomorrow. Tomorrow's a tight day. Tomorrow's my last day of teaching for the semester, and then it's just grading, as all you teachers know, with finals next week and stuff. So probably Friday we will get out to the east side of town and be driving out your way, Roger. And Carrie, you might let us know if you want to text us or whatever. Might let us know what time you're off. I think I know what your schedule is, but we'll head down towards you all and try to touch base with you all. So if we don't get to you this week, we'll pick up on Monday, but hopefully between yesterday, today's Friday, and early next week, we'll touch base with everybody face to face. Chad, except for you and Brandy, sorry, you probably don't want to see me face to face anyway. So miss your smile though. Send me a picture. Text me a picture, Chad. Text me a picture of your smile. I need to see your smile. Still waiting for any questions. It didn't come through, Deanna. Maybe break it up in parts.
Or text it to me. Copy it and text it to
or
me.
you can, if you want to copy it and text it to Susan, she can pass it on to me if you want.
Have we what? Roger, is he not done
I'm guessing there's more to your question, Roger.
yet? We could just start a big long rabbit there.
Yeah, everybody fill in. I wish I hadn't come so fast. We were gonna fill in the rest of Roger's statement. Yes, Roger, we read Psalm 78, 1-8, and talked about it for a few minutes. And the subject of teaching kids, a question from one of my kids.
Probably
okay.
more's coming.
So yeah, Roger, you can go back and pick up the first, 15 minutes or so of the video.
Here, I'll
and
copy the comments.
Catch the discussion. Don't do too much, Deanna. It's limited to 200 characters. Are all relationships hard? Yeah, let's open this up to other people. Now, don't get yourself in trouble if your spouse is with you at the moment, or whatever. But um, let's make this a group effort. If you want to chime in on Deanna's question, and I'll read them off here as they come, and then kind of discuss them as we go. And now here's going to be one of the things that you consider as you're providing an answer. You have to have a relationship in mind. Like Susan's, we all have different opinions. She just goes with my opinion, so I know that's not what makes it hard.
Not.
She says not.
I just put it in there too. Are you doing mine? Were you naming them?
Okay, so Susan says no matter what the relationship, husband and wife, parent, child, friend.
Above that, we all have different opinions, no matter what the relationship. Did you not see mine? We all have different opinions.
I said we all have different opinions.
Oh, okay.
I read that. Okay. Yeah, brought up differently, which makes viewpoint different. If you're brought up in different parts of the country, that makes differences. Different ages. We were just talking about senior adults versus millennials as a part of the study time. The expectations are so different. And one other thing that where is it? A book I recently read, The Road Back to You. This talks about the Enneagram and how our personalities, and the Enneagram, it's not necessarily a Christian understanding of personality, but it certainly fits. And the writer is a Christian, and he brings it into a Christian context, and it's very informative about how our childhood affected our personality and some other things. And so our age, our expectations, our life experiences, all of those do it. So cultural context, age context, with my history, I never know if it's just me. Secular context or biblical context. Yeah. What age order, what happens, if think about the internal conflict. And when we think about relationships, we have a relationship with ourselves, right? And so if we have a relationship with ourselves and we don't always get along with ourselves, whether we are challenged by ourselves and some of the things that we do, or like Paul writes in Romans 7, I don't do the things I want to do. I do the things I don't want to do. That's a relationship in and of itself. And we have challenges there. But boyfriend, girlfriend.
Yes.
So in that context, there's a lot of relationships that are good. There's a lot of relationships that are not. We're currently watching. We watch during lunch and dinner most nights. That's sometimes our only TV time of the day. But we watch Everybody Loves Raymond, and right now, and if that's the way my relationship was, if I could talk, if that was the way my relationship was with Susan, we would struggle a lot. It's funny to watch because it's a comedy, right? But every relationship has some good points. That's why they got together. But some relationships have worse points than others. Deb says if it's already hard, may not be one to continue in. That's what I told her. And that's rough. And here's the thing. Dating is tough. But dating is an experiment. And some will say that, I've heard well-meaning people, dating is practicing to divorce.
Oh, wow.
That's a pretty harsh statement. Because dating is not a commitment. It can become a commitment, but a lot of it's one way to explore. It's one way to determine characteristics that I like about someone, characteristics that I don't like. Now, the challenge is we must learn from that. If we don't learn from the challenges that are there, then we're going to repeat the same thing. We're going to find the same type of person. And of course, there's plenty of studies that women tend to marry someone like their father, and boys often marry someone like their mother. More, I think that's more, if I remember right, that's more young women tend to marry someone like their father than the other way around. But there is truth in that. I married my grandma, by the way. That even down to the 5'2" and red hair. At the time, she had redder hair. But it's a chance to experiment. And yes, people break up a lot with that, but it's much healthier to break up when you're dating, because once you get married, marriage is a solemn. It is meant to be a solemn vow, and I know it's not always treated that way in today's world, but by the time you get married, you should know the person well enough to know that you want to be with them. And I realize that things happen within marriages. There's all kinds of situations as far as abuse, unfaithfulness, and abuse would be a lack of faithfulness as well, for that matter. But so yeah, it's much better to get out of a relationship when it's a dating relationship than it is from a marriage relationship, unless some of those extreme examples fit the what is going on. And I think Jesus allows for that. I certainly believe that Jesus allows for divorce in the situation of unfaithfulness. I think that Paul definitely hints at an abuse type of situation in his writings, 1 Corinthians 7. So I think there are some situations, and that comes back to love your neighbor as yourself as well, I think. So that would be my thoughts on the challenges of relationships. But and sometimes those aren't known. I mean, people know how to play games. You could be in what seems like the most ideal relationship ever, and you get married and it's going along fine for a period of time, and then the person, their real self comes out, or maybe something happens. We talked about people changing briefly a little bit earlier. We talked about people changing. The reality is that those events in our lives that we need to look back on and tell others about, as we mentioned earlier, sometimes a switch flips in our mind and even in our heart, and we become a different person based upon some experience. So that would be my 2 cents on that. Yeah, there's a book. Deb says, even in friendships, there are toxic relationships. There's a book that I'm about to start reading. I think it's called When to Walk Away. And I just picked it up about a week or so ago. And the idea of, if I remember right, Jesus walks away 40 times, I think. Again, I haven't read the book yet, but as I was listening to the author talk about this, I think if you look at the Gospels, 40 times Jesus walks away, or somebody walks away from him, and which means he lets them. For instance, one would be the rich young ruler, right? Jesus gives him a challenge. He basically says, hey, come follow me. The guy walks away. Jesus didn't chase him. Jesus walked away from the religious leaders at times. So in that context, if people are toxic, and by toxic, are they dragging you down? There's an old story about monkeys in a big barrel, and they put the monkeys. This, I think this is a story. I don't think this is what really happened, but maybe it did. They put the monkeys in this really big, wide, and tall barrel, and the monkeys began to try to climb out. And as the monkeys tried to climb out, somebody would be up there with a stick, knocking the monkeys back down so that they couldn't climb out. Well, over time, the monkeys quit trying to get out because they knew they weren't going to be able to get out. Okay. So they put more monkeys in this barrel. And as those monkeys began to try to climb out, the first set of monkeys that were in there, they started to pull them back down. The person from up top did not have to push them back down. Then maybe they squirted them with water. Maybe it was squirting them with water. I don't know. Anyway, the monkeys that were inside kept pulling them back down. Those monkeys gave up. Then more monkeys were put in this thing, and same thing happened. All the monkeys are trying to, as monkeys would try to climb out, more monkeys would try to bring them back down. And the idea is that over time, we are groomed to become toxic people. We are groomed to not want the best for others. And therefore, we limit the potential of others. We limit what might happen to others because of what has happened to us in the past. And we need to avoid those people. In a very real sense, if you look at the way Jesus dealt with things, he identified people. He confronted them when they needed to be confronted. But if they weren't willing to deal with it, he avoided them. Okay, so we identify challengers. We identify conflict. We identify people who are going to cause potential problems. Then we confront them. Biblically, Matthew 18, we confront them. If we're the problem, Matthew 5, they're to come to us, or we go to them, however that is. So those are two passages, Jesus' own teaching, one in the Sermon on the Mount, one as it relates to challenges within the church. Then in both of those situations, first identify, then confront. And after that, if they don't resolve it, if they're not willing to resolve it, especially if they're going to be harmful to you, not necessarily physically, but it could be emotionally or spiritually or whatever, you walk away and you just leave them behind. And again, that sounds really harsh until you realize that Jesus did it. And I want to say it was 40 times, might have been 50, but I haven't read the book yet. So I can't even remember who the author is at the moment. Many of you would probably recognize the name because he's written some marriage books and stuff like that in the past.
What's the
So
name of the book?
I think it's called When to Walk Away. If you tell me the name of the author, I can tell you where the book is. If you want to go look for
Gary
the book.
Thomas?
Gary Thomas. That's it. Gary Thomas. So
Google is a great thing.
yes, Google is a great thing. Okay. Any other questions? As I mentioned earlier, if you have any thoughts for the daily videos that I'm doing, you can throw them in a comment here, or you can send an email to the church for that matter too. Text me, text Susan. We'll see them. Put them in the comments under the Facebook or on the YouTube video as well. She checks those daily. If it's an old video, we might not check it. Might miss that, but oftentimes we can. Whoop.
Well, I can see comment. I can scroll down.
Yeah.
Easily in YouTube.
Yeah. Other questions or thoughts? Give you an idea that about something I'm thinking about as we please write something. If you write, I'll address it. But as we consider when we are going to move back to meeting together as a church, one of the things that I'm thinking about is having a time within the context of the service of question and answers, shortening the message and allowing questions about the message to come and be addressed right there on the spot. So obviously this would precipitate a change in how we go about service, but trying to incorporate more time for prayer, more time for singing, which means less actual message during the sermon. And that's why I said earlier, using the daily videos as a way to supplement the sermon is a way to, continue to disperse information, hopefully for transformation. But if we have time for questions as a part of that as well, then ultimately that's better for transformation. As I've been thinking about this, some of you might remember our Sunday nights before we were interrupted by this process. I was talking about the difference between teaching and training, and one of the things as it relates to, if you look at the model that Jesus gave, and I shared this with that group, but I'll remind the group that was there that night. I don't. It's been a couple months. I don't remember who was where doing what, but and for all of our benefit, if you just look at Mark 3. In Mark 3, Jesus says that he's calling his disciples, and he says, "I'm going to show you how. I'm going to teach you how to preach, and I'm going to teach you how to cast out demons." That's basically when he called his apostles to be with him. That's what he said, to preach and to cast out demons. Mark 3. Mark 4, what does he do? He teaches them. And he teaches them in parables. They come and ask questions. Then in at the end of Mark 4, he does a miracle, which they're not going to be able to do. He calms the storm, in the boat while he's supposedly sleeping, which he may have been. That's fine. But then Mark 5, he cast out a demon. He heals the woman with the issue of blood. He heals a woman, the girl who had died, brings her back from the dead. And then in Mark 6, he says, "Bye, you go do this." And so they do. And then towards the end of Mark 6, they come back, and he's going to debrief with them. But as they begin to debrief, in a quiet place, he took them off to a quiet place to do that. People followed; they were hungry, and then we have the feeding of the 5,000. So that's what Jesus did. But in the midst of that, in the teaching, this is what Jesus did. He taught those around him, and then they said, "Jesus, we don't understand." Now, maybe not everybody asked that, but like in the parable of the soils, the hard soil and the soft soil and all that, he teaches them. And he teaches whomever is there. His disciples come to him and say, "Jesus, can you explain this a little bit further?" And here's what we know about Jesus. Jesus would have known that that was going on in their minds. Like in Mark chapter 2, it says he perceived the thoughts of those who were there. Or perceived in their hearts. He perceived what their hearts were thinking about him. So Jesus would have had a capacity to do that, and he could have just answered their question. But there's something about asking a question that makes it more personal, that makes it more direct, and perhaps I don't know, but maybe you're not wanting. Maybe somebody here's wanting to ask a question and doesn't feel like it's a worthwhile question because others might say, that's an obvious answer. Well, remember what I said earlier about Genesis 3? I messed up, right? So, just because you don't, others might have the same question. They may not want to ask it either. Okay. So please feel free to ask questions. But in the sermon context, if I preach for, 20 minutes instead of 40, and then maybe we take the offering after that. We put cards in the offering plate, and we have those cards that would be anonymous questions. We have our question cards in the pew already, but we have it would be a chance for anonymous questions, or if somebody wants to raise their hand and ask a question, we could take a few minutes for that, in addition to some extra prayer time, in addition to some extra singing, and then we go from there. So that's one of the things that I'm thinking. As my daily videos have been talking about off and on, we have to change. And one of the things that we have to change is we have to blend this digital and human interaction that we have. And so that would be a way. In fact, we might even consider, how could we take, if we're doing YouTube live for the message, how could we take questions? Somebody's watching it. Chad, I'm just going to pick on you because you're out of town. You should be at renovation. Okay. Not saying don't go to renovation. But somebody like Chad's watching it from out of town and they have a question, that question could be answered on the spot as well. So that that gives us an idea. And just to really show my cards, one of the things that I want to talk about as a possibility is flipping our service in Sunday school. Again, right now, I think anything's on the table, and this is not a mandate, but in light of what I just shared about asking questions, what if we then took the content of the message and the questions that have been answered, and we dig a little bit deeper in classes, break off into our classes as we normally would, and I'd have to be very prepared on this, but and share with the teachers up front to let them read through and stuff, and I'd have to supply some more information. I haven't worked through how all of that would work, but then in your classes, we discuss the sermon in more of a breakout fashion. But a part of what we do in the classes is we talk about, okay, how do we live this out? Rather than the pastor saying, okay, and so here's what you can do with it this week. And then we go off, we go to lunch, we don't really think about it. Oh, good message, bad message, whatever it was. But have an idea of okay, this is how we could do it. And then the beginning of the next class the next week, say, okay, what did you do with that last week? And I have lots of rationale working in my mind for that, including, if you go to, so tonight, your application tonight was share with other people, share with future later generations, younger people, about what God has done in your life and stuff. Great. And then on Sunday, there will be a different application point. If you go to Sunday school, there's a different application point. And maybe you do, the videos that I have a different application point. And I haven't even done the first thing yet, and I don't even know how to do that. Right. So how do I do 4 different things or 5 different things in a week? Mm-hmm. Well, what if they were all centered around one? Yeah. And so my daily videos became an encouragement to do that, to fulfill whatever you committed to in your Sunday school class. And maybe your Sunday school class commits to do something together. I don't know. So I'm laying all my cards out on the table. That's what's going through my mind, and we'll have to see. There's, I mean, how do you prepare teachers to do that on a regular basis? It's one thing to say we could do this for 6 weeks. It's another thing to say you do this for 6 years. And anyway, but thanks, Kara, for the great idea comment. But if you have feedback on that, again, if you don't want to post it here, you can send me an email and say, Andy, you're crazy. I would never do that. Whatever. I'm just, like I said, I'm laying my cards. I have been thinking a lot about, how we move forward as a church. It is 80% of my mind at this point. So we don't have all the answers. I'm just coming up with possibilities and sharing them. So. Okay. Any other thoughts or questions? You guys know I'll just keep talking, so you don't say anything. Pray for Susan, because she has to listen to this stuff all day long. Well, not all day long, but she hears this multiple times, don't you, dear? She's nodding.
3 mid-sentence rabbits tonight. For you later.
Yeah, Kara. Kara asks, what if you mix the Sunday school what if you mix the Sunday school classes with all adults, because there is much to learn from those older than you? That would be a possibility. We age graded ministry comes in part because of school. Now, I mean, there's life experiences that, if you're 75, life for you is different than it is at 50. You'll remember that. Those of us who are at 50 don't know what it's like at 75. But at 50, it's different than at 25. At 25, it's far different than it was at 18. 18 is far different than 15. But that kind of goes back to our psalm tonight, right? You know, that older generations can share with younger generations, and so that there could be value in that. Yeah, more to consider and explore. Absolutely. Susan says I've chased rabbits 3 times in the middle of a sentence. I'm trying to do better with that, but my mind gets ahead, and then hopefully I'm circling back. But
Actually, that was just another one. So cool. Oh, you'll know when we're done.
okay, she told me I just did it again. I didn't realize I just did it that time. So.
It's only because I'm taking notes is why I noticed.
Oh yeah, Are you still posting these notes? Yeah. Okay, where are you posting them? She's going to tell you where she's posting them. If you haven't been, I think she did this a couple weeks ago, but anyway. Any other thoughts or questions before we get close to closing? Yeah, Susan's overhauled the website a lot. Deb says, I don't know how you're keeping daily messages straight. I try to keep them all straight for myself and forgot which day was which one. Deb, you know, no, I don't shoot from the hip. Now you made me jump into a rabbit that time. I write these down in advance. I mean, like this week's theme, I'm keeping there, but Deb, you know, you're probably the most organized person that I know. And so if you can't keep them straight, it can't be good for me.
Shit, that's funny.
But he's not corralling questions would be a challenge. Roger, are you talking about on a Sunday morning? Is that what you're referring to? I'm not making any comment on yours, Deb, other than acknowledging I see it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Again, I think we could use the question cards that are in the pews to, you know, put in the offering plates, and then just have, you know, I don't know if we're using offering plates. I mean, that's another question that comes up too, right? So, yeah, we'll have to think through that if we did that, but it would be real time. Sometimes I get questions during the week, but I think if there was an opportunity for real time questions, it might be advantageous. We'll just have to explore, and like I said, anything that we do that is massively or minorly different is an experiment. You know, we don't have to lock ourselves into any changes as we return. But I do think the one thing that is going to change sufficiently is we are going to remain digital. We are still going to have a digital component because we know that there are people that are beyond our walls, beyond our town, that are engaging at some level right now, and you know, so we don't want to abandon that. But like we did on March 15th, our last time that we met together, you know, we right before the message, we pulled out the laptop, and it was already set up and ready to go. We just had to turn it on and go live. So, yeah, Chad, that's you. So you know, we'll have to figure that out. But we will definitely do something digital still in addition. And yeah, the offering plate issue. I did hear something today, you know, about I was reading and listening to the online giving and automated giving, and I guess we could already do automated giving. I mean, people could do automated giving by telling their bank, send the church a check. Once our online giving is available, then that could just be done via ACH. And we're waiting any day. They just had an abundance of requests for online giving right now. We're still waiting final word that it's set up, but once it's set up, we'll be ready to go. But with that, one of my challenges, in fact, if you think about our worship, about our bulletin, our worship service says worship through giving. And it said that for years now. And I know a lot of people think of the time of taking up the offering as halftime, and so there's talking and stuff like that. And I'm not saying that's wrong, but it is a time of worship. And if everybody just gives online or sets up automated giving or something like that, we are going to lose that element. If we're not passing the plate, we're going to lose those minutes. But one of the things they suggested is you could still have the moment by, even if you give online or in an automated fashion, you could still fill out your envelope. And I know the finance team talked about this a few weeks ago. We could still fill out an envelope and drop that. It wouldn't have anything in it. It would just say, I gave this week and here's how much I gave, or whatever else. And of course, our Sunday school classes use the envelopes for different statistics that we measure and whatnot as well. So all of that could still be done and counted, and the person could feel like they were worshiping through giving rather than just the set it and forget it, which I'm going to do. I mean, I'm going to have a bank draft, taken out of our account, just makes it easier. But I need to do more than set it and forget it. I need to make sure that I'm taking time to realize that my giving is an element of worship. And so we'll have to figure that out. But passing the plates, yeah, I mean, even, some people might not even want to touch envelopes. I don't know. We'll see. Deb's asking about church camp. All we know at this point, Deb, is that they are not going to have it the first week of June. The problem for the association is the camp is managed by like 12 groups, different associations. And so every year, every week of the summer, a different association comes in and has the camp for that week. And so that's why we always rotate weeks. So like, I think when we first came 9 years ago, we were in either late July or early August, but over time, every year you move up 1 week. And so this week we're the 1st of June. Next week, because of the way Memorial Day falls, we're actually the 1st of June again, whatever the exact dates are each year. But I know what they're going to have to try to work out is if there's room, even if they decide to do camp. Deanna told me earlier today that Resound Fest is canceled for this year. So it might be that Grand Oaks just cancels camp altogether. We haven't heard any of that yet. But if they still have camp, then the question will be, where can our group slot in amongst another association? So typically the first Monday of the month, I have a meeting with pastors in the association. Obviously, I don't know that we're going to meet. We didn't meet in April. I don't know if we're going to meet in May, although I'm going to recommend that we do it by Zoom if we can't do it in person, because that question we at least need to have some way of talking to our people about the possibilities. And Roger's saying, given in church sets a visible example of others. It's an important part of worship. And so, I think there still has to be a part. Well, one thing we could do, and many churches do this, is they bring their offering up to the front, and it's a visible, everybody gets up, and this is especially true. This is a celebration moment in the Black church. Everybody comes forward, and if you don't have money to come forward, somebody else gives you money so that you can come forward, and at least you're not ostracized because you didn't give something. So then nobody's passing the plate. Obviously that takes a lot more time because you have to have everybody come forward to do that. So there's different ways to do things. We'll just have to explore those. So okay. Let me go ahead and pray. If you have a final question, go ahead and pop it in there, and I'll answer it in a moment. But if not, thank you for joining tonight, and we'll I don't know what we're going to do next Wednesday night. It's possible next Wednesday night is our last restricted night, meaning we're not able to meet yet together. I'm going to be talking to the deacons over the next couple of days. I've already talked to one who's in favor of following the governor's orders for waiting one more week, but we'll get with all the deacons and figure out what we're doing, and we'll send out a text to the church on that. But we may not meet through May 3rd, and we'll just have to go from there and see. But let me pray, and then if you do have any more comments or questions, throw those down in the chat room, and I'll address that in just a moment. God, we do thank you for your love. We thank you for your patience. We thank you for your grace. And Lord, I'm just, one of the things that has been encouraging these last couple of days and talking to various members, just a portion of our church so far, members and attenders, is the ability to get out in the sun, the hope that is bringing from people, and even there's still a need to be distant from one another from a physical perspective. There's a common joy. In fact, many of the people were out doing their gardens or doing other work, and so it's just lifting spirits because it's been cold or rainy and so cloudy for much of the last month, even as we are feeling the gloom of being isolated and the challenge of this virus. We have weather that kind of fits the mood of many, but now, Lord, we're seeing some sunshine and feeling some warmth, and maybe that will continue to lift us in a good direction. So, Lord, we thank you for that. God, there are many decisions that need to be made, and none of them, not every decision will be perfect for everyone. All we can do is try to do what we think is best, and we see that on the national and even the world level right now. Decisions that people are making that have to affect the masses, and yet for some of the people that are affected, it does not affect people the same way. What's true on the global scale is going to be true in the church. It's true in our families, as we saw earlier with relationships, the challenges and the expectations that come even in relationships. So Lord, just show us your wisdom. Again, there is no perfect answer in this. There's no one way to meet the need of everybody. But Lord, we can determine how we can move forward in a united fashion, even though there may be disagreements. We can come together on something that works. Whether there are substantial changes or relatively minor changes, God, we want your wisdom, because ultimately it's your church, not ours. And so help us to know how to move forward the way you would want us to serve people as you would want us to serve. God, again, we thank you. We love you. Help us to be that voice for generations that don't know, or even for people of our own generation that have forgotten that, different challenges come. Some are big, some are maybe less so, but you have seen us through so many different things in our own personal past, in our family's past, in our state's past, in our international past, and even crises that affect the world. You are there. You see through it all, and you have a purpose, and you are working so much during this current challenge. We don't even know all the stories, and may never know all the stories, but Lord, we don't have to look far to see how much of an impact you're making in the lives of so many people and so many families in a good way during this last 5-6 weeks and whatever may come. So Lord, just let us find those moments of joy, find those moments of encouragement and inspiration in the lives of others, and apply that to ourselves so that we can continue to spread your hope as well. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Okay. Velvet bag on a pole. We've talked about putting a box in the back of the church as a possibility to just let people drop their stuff in a box that's locked. That only one or two people would have the key for. One of those people not being me. but like our financial secretary and stuff. So yeah, there's multiple options. We just have to figure out what's best for us at this time. So okay, well, that is another Wednesday Bible study and Q&A. I'm probably going to stick with the Psalm next week again, but I haven't fully made up my mind, and so we'll put something out next Wednesday afternoon when I do my normal daily video, and you can see that then. So if you have any questions in the meantime, email me. Again, leave comments in our YouTube or Facebook pages on those videos if there's any particular topic, or email the church if there's any particular topic that you might want me to address, or a theme that you might want me to address. I am still planning on preaching through Romans, not immediately following this series. Our current series, the last of the Apostles' Creed, ends this week. Next week, I will have a conclusion of that series that is actually apart from the creed, but as a conclusion. Then I'm going to take a couple of weeks just to kind of address a couple things and move us through. And probably by the end of May or the 1st of June, we will start Romans, and it'll be a long series. Might break it up into a few different tracks, but it will take us quite some time to get through Romans. So that's kind of where we're headed on Sundays at this point. Join us on Sunday evenings if you want, but again, I do need you to email me and let me know if you want to be there, so that I can send you an email to connect to Zoom, and that'll be a different meeting ID each week, perhaps. So, or at least a password each week will be different. So you'll need to email me. If you've already emailed me this last week, I'll just send you an invite. If you don't show up, that's fine. But otherwise, email me if you want to be included in those discussions. So until next week, we bid you adieu.
I was going to try to do the monthly stats, but I'm going to do it on my own computer. Okay, so here's the mid-sentence rabbits that were frustrated. Well, all of them were, but let's see.